afternoon to join this webinar, which is sponsored by the Urban Waters Learning Network. And I'm going to talk just very briefly about that. We have three great presenters with a lot of experience in the area of water quality monitoring. And so I'm very pleased to be able to have Stacy Erickson, Jason Ulseth, and Rachel Hangston with us today. So you'll be hearing from each of them. My name is Deanna Toledo. I am one of the coordinators for the Urban Waters Learning Network. And our learning network, I'm going to talk a little bit about it because in the past we've done a number of these webinars within our learning network, but this topic seems to be of broad enough interest that we advertised it to our river network partners. And so we have quite a few folks here on the line who have not been part of Urban Waters Learning Network activities in the past. So as you see in front of you, River Network is one of the organizations that is engaged as a coordinator, as is Groundwork USA, and this is an EPA-funded project, the Learning Network. And so what you see in front of you is a picture we took a couple of years ago at a river rally of some of the members of the network. So what it is a lot of folks just like you who are working in an urban waters context, and so it includes quite a diverse number of organizations, and of projects that are happening on the ground. A good number of them are doing some level of water quality monitoring. And so that's why you get to hear from Jason and Rachel, who have been part of the Learning Network and have been, in fact, Urban Waters grantees through the EPA Small Grants Program for Urban Waters. So the goal of the Learning Network, and I offer this if any of you are interested in joining and are working in an urban context, would be great to bring you into the fold. It is a peer network, people and organizations that are working, again, in an urban context, both focusing on urban waterways, protection, restoration, and the communities that surround them. So oftentimes these organizations are working on issues of access, of equitable development, of the other issues that come along with urban waters work. Our goal is really to support the members of the network by providing opportunities like this webinar for some of the members to share their experiences, to gain skills for those of you joining, and to really share some of the resources that are out there, which Stacy will be talking about on the part of EPA. So there's a website, urbanwaterslearningnetwork.org. Take a look. Ask to join. You'll find that link on that website. If you're interested, it would be great to have you. And we are having an in-person meeting at River Rally in New Mexico on the 1st, the afternoon before the official launch of Rally. So if any of you are already planning to be at Rally and are interested, we'd love to have you join. Just shoot me an email. So with that, I want to just highlight a couple of things before I turn it to our presenters. I see a lot of you are using the chat, which Ryan just kindly cleared for us. So that chat box on the left-hand side of your screen, at any time, please feel free to type in your questions. The presenters will be pausing at least one point in their presentation to take questions, but you can just type them in throughout and I'll be monitoring that screen. Also, I want to highlight up at the top of your screen above the slides, you see the figure of a person with their hand raised. If you click on that little drop-down menu next to them, you see this is a way to raise hands. So if we're, as we are asking to raise your hands for particular, to particular reasons, that's how you can do it. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to turn it to our first presenter, Stacy Erickson, who is with U.S. EPA Region 8. Stacy, though, has a long career with EPA, about 22 years. She has been one of the leaders within the Urban Waters program, but also works across a number of different programs or different issues, sustainable development, low-impact development and green infrastructure, brownfields, and a number more. She has varied experience across the agency, working with enforcement, with a Superfund program, with hazardous waste, and has a solid science background in chemical engineering and ecological engineering. And so it's probably for that reason that she's emerged as a leader within the urban waters team at River Network, and has been hugely helpful to a lot of organizations who are putting together their QAPs for their monitoring programs and just designing effective monitoring programs. So very glad to have Stacy here, and I'm going to turn it over to her as I pull up your presentation. Thank you, Stacy.
Great.
You're up.
Thanks, Deanna. I appreciate the very lovely intro. Everybody, please bear with me. I'm having a few asthma problems this morning. Hopefully I make it all the way through, but I may need to break for water or other things. So as Deanna mentioned, I have worked for EPA for a very long time. I also spent 4 years on loan to the City and County of Denver as their brownfields coordinator, and also work with them on the Mayor's Water Quality Initiative and a few other things. And one of the things that I do is work with folks on volunteer water quality monitoring, and just try to give you a little bit of background on the Urban Waters program and how all of this fits together. What you're seeing up there on your first screen is actually some pictures from Colorado. The top picture is the headwaters where the drinking water supply comes from, and then the ones that you see down on the bottom are the South Platte River, and those are right near downtown in Confluence Park and about a 10-minute walk actually from my office. Urban Waters has become a up-and-coming and new program at EPA, and a lot of that is because of the issues that we are dealing with, the focus on urban areas, and a lot of problems that are difficult to deal with traditional programs. And so this is a way to partner with communities. The picture that you see on your screen actually is the South Platte River over there at the right-hand side, and it's right next to Santa Fe Boulevard, which is a state highway in Colorado. So a lot of our highways run along our waterways and doesn't help a lot with water quality or accessibility. A lot of small impacts really add up in urban areas, and there's a lot of concentrated people, there's a lot of trash, there's a lot of pollution that affects drinking water quality and safety, and urban development makes waterways accessible in a lot of areas. Here in Denver, a lot of the railroads and highways and other infrastructure makes it difficult, particularly for some of our environmental justice neighborhoods, in order to access the rivers. The top picture you see is actually what the South Platte River used to look like before a lot of the work that ended up happening by the Greenway Foundation and a lot of other partners. And then down at the bottom is, again, near Confluence Park, near downtown Denver. EPA's role is to work with communities, particularly underserved communities, working to try to align the federal government programs and investments. We are a bureaucracy. The other federal agencies are bureaucracies, and so we've worked really hard under our Urban Waters Partnership to try to align some of the different programs and make them work together better. We work a lot on expanding our partnerships and building local capacity, and then trying to find different innovative ways to communicate the environmental and economic potential of safe and clean water. This is just a list of a bunch of different programs that fall under the Urban Waters umbrella. It's not completely inclusive. What I wanted to put under there is that there's a whole lot of people in every EPA region, and just because maybe one person may not be able to help you, there's a lot of other people that may be able to help you. And so these are just looking at a lot of the different programs in EPA that fall under the Urban Waters umbrella, and use that as sort of a resource later. This is a list of a lot of our federal partners under the Urban Waters Partnership. It sounds like we have a little background noise. Maybe somebody put their phone on hold.
If you would please use *6 to turn yourself on mute, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay. So just a bunch of logos here from a lot of our different federal partners. EPA has some different funding sources that can be used to help with volunteer water quality monitoring. One is the Urban Water Small Grants, and hopefully we will have another request for proposals coming out sometime later this year. Section 319, which is the 9-point source pollution part of the Clean Water Act, and that money goes to each state, and each state gives it out individually, but a lot of those have actually been used for water quality monitoring. EPA also gives some funding to some of the states under Section 106 of the Clean Water Act, and some states have used that to help fund water quality monitoring. There's also Section 320 under the National Estuary Program that some states use. In Denver, we don't have that. We don't have any estuaries, but that is certainly applicable to a lot of the other states. We also have environmental education grants and environmental justice grants, and so it's also possible to use some of those resources to help fund volunteer water quality monitoring. EPA can provide technical assistance. I think one of the things that I want to mention is every region is a little bit different in how they operate. We have 10 regions. My region is Region 8, and we cover Colorado, Utah, Montana, Wyoming, and North and South Dakota, but every region's a little bit different in how they operate. This is some of the things that we typically do in our region, and I think a lot of the other regions are similar, but they may not be exactly the same. So one of the things is to loan equipment out to people. I think Rachel may talk about some of this later. I think we've loaned them a little bit of equipment, things like GPS units. We also typically give out sample bottles, things like that. Laboratory analysis is another thing. Rachel actually has used our laboratory, and I think it's been helpful in a lot of ways. We have a volunteer water quality monitoring program within Colorado called River Watch, but they don't do E. coli analysis. And so we've used our laboratory to help out with that. We also do a lot of our own samples that are run through there from our monitoring coordinator. We can review and approve QAPs and SAPs, and I'll talk a little bit more about what those are later. They're loads of fun, but you have to do them. We can give example documents. I find that's actually really helpful in working with communities, not just giving them the guidance document on how to prepare a QAP and SAP, but actually giving you samples of documents from other groups that we've worked with in the past. Sometimes we can go out and do training on how to do water quality sampling. We have a lot of EPA staff, as I mentioned earlier, that are technical resources for folks, and you may want to avail yourself of a number of different people. Also, the states or local departments of health, state parks and wildlife groups, other federal agencies and colleges and universities can also be really helpful in providing technical assistance for your projects. On monitoring for the South Platte River, EPA does a lot of monitoring ourselves, and we also monitor in conjunction with some of our municipalities. We've actually stepped in and helped out the city and county of Denver as their budgets have been cut. We've been doing a lot of sampling for E. coli, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, and personal care products on the South Platte River main stem, and also some of the tributaries, Westerly Creek, Sand Creek, and Bear Creek. Our Urban Waters Partnership is working on a water quality assessment. Rachel has really been involved with that and actually is sort of the wrangler for the overall group in working with a lot of different technical folks and trying to pull together a lot of water quality monitoring data from disparate sources. Some of it's volunteer data, some of it's professionally gathered data, and trying to use that to look at a metropolitan area-wide water quality assessment. We have a group, the Urban Waters River Rangers with the Greenway Foundation, which we've done some work with in the past. We also have given out some small grants to Groundwork Denver and Earth Force. I think Donnie's on the phone today too, and Rachel's on the phone. And Donnie's grant is a little bit different. It's more with children, and he has a really great program collecting data, but slightly different kinds of data, more for environmental education purposes. Our region doesn't actually require a QAP or a SAP for that, but some EPA regions are a little bit different. Rachel's work did require a QAP and SAP for us to move forward on that. We also have done some trash sampling and education through a non-point source pollution grant through the state, and some work that was done with the Greenway Foundation. And we also have something called World Water Monitoring Day, which we do every September with some private partners. CH2M Hill is our main partner, and we go out and do monitoring with school kids along the South Platte River. These are all pictures of a river ranger training that EPA conducted with our River Watch program through the state a few years ago. In the center picture there, you can see Sandy Spence, who used to work in our laboratory and who now is head of our water quality unit. And she's helping do some training on how to conduct sampling. And then you can see a lot of the students, they're actually doing titrations for some of the different things, and they're going through their training. A great way to meet up with other people who are doing the same sorts of things and who you might be able to learn a lot from is through conferences and networks. There's a national monitoring conference that goes on. That's a great resource. EPA is usually involved in that. U.S. Geological Survey is quite heavily involved in that, and that's a great opportunity. River Rally, as Deanna mentioned earlier, and I think all of our Urban Water Small grantees are going to be going to that, and that's going to be in New Mexico this year, but it's a great place to meet people. State or regional conferences. We have one in Colorado called the Colorado Watershed Assembly. Actually a great event even if you're not from Colorado. It's always in a beautiful location in the fall up in the mountains, and you get to meet a lot of really other great people and talk about a lot of watershed issues, water quality monitoring, and a whole host of other things. Data sharing networks can be another great place to network with folks. We have one in Colorado called the Colorado Data Sharing Network, but there's other ones around the country. And there's also a volunteer monitoring networks in Colorado. We have a River Watch. Other states have other programs. I know the state of Minnesota has a really extensive volunteer monitoring network. And then there's also the Urban Waters Learning Network. And I think I forgot to ask earlier to launch the first poll question. If we can launch that to see who was on the line, I forgot to do that at the beginning. So if you could all vote about if you're thinking about sort of what level you're at as far as your volunteer monitoring programs go. It looks like we have a lot of people who are looking to improve an existing program and expand an existing program, and a fewer number of people that are thinking about or planning to launch a program. So, okay, that's great. Thank you very much. That was helpful to see that. I've included here some volunteer monitoring websites. EPA has one. There's a number of sub-websites under that. It includes all kinds of different resources from EPA and outside of EPA. It also includes the guidance for QAPs and SAPs and a number of other things. And there's a couple other really good ones there that have a lot of really useful information. Okay, why do I have to do a QAP? A QAP is a Quality Assurance Project Plan, and a SAP is a Sampling and Analysis Plan. Typically for volunteer water quality monitoring, it's usually a combined document, so it's usually a QAP and a SAP. Sometimes we do them separately. A lot of that is, well, for one thing, if we give money to a group, it's required. Um, so you have to do it. But there's a lot of other really good reasons for doing it beyond that, and a lot of it has to do with scientific integrity and trying to have quality and defensible data. So, and also it's really helpful. If you have good quality data, it can be used for other things. I can give an example of a group that I worked with in Fargo, North Dakota, where they collected some data along the Red River of the North, and the data was really good quality data. They had a really good CLAP and SAP, and they received some funding from EPA. And because the data was really good, it was able to be used for a number of other things, and it was actually later used to help create a total maximum daily load, because it was actually, there wasn't any data at that point in time. There wasn't much data from the state, and so this actually was able to give a lot more data. And so a lot of that data is actually useful for a lot of reasons, and for agencies that work on water quality monitoring, because we don't have enough people to go out sometimes and do all of that. Um, Basically, you want to look at what questions you want to answer. What is the data going to be used for? What do you want to sample for? Do you want to look for things like E. coli? Sampling for that is a little bit different than if you're looking at other things like dissolved oxygen or pH or metals or nutrients or something else. How will the analysis be done? Will it be done in a laboratory? Will test kits be used? Who all is going to use your data? Um, and even if you don't collect your own data, you may still need a QAP if you're interpreting other people's data, and that's called a secondary data QAP. It's not as involved as doing a full-fledged QAP, but it's still required anyway. And again, if you can talk to some of the folks in your EPA region, it might be really helpful for you to get some example documents. There's some quality assurance web resources. The top one is for our national program. I've included the bottom one for our Region 8 program here in Denver. There's a number of example documents on there, although I think you can probably get some ones that are probably more helpful to a volunteer monitoring program through some of your contacts in the EPA regions. And I think that is it for me. If anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand. We'll also take questions at the end.
There's a couple of questions here, Stacy, in the chat box about the small grants programs that could support monitoring. Are there any of those that could support ocean water monitoring being contaminated by urban runoff?
I believe as long as it's, well, first of all, and actually I think Sun is on the phone, so she would be better able to answer this than I am. We're working on the language for the latest request for proposal that's going to go out, and so it hasn't been finalized. But typically in the past, if it's anything that's related to, urban water quality monitoring, that's usually been an eligible activity. One of the things that can be difficult about doing stormwater sampling is obviously being ready to go out when you have a storm event, and the safety of that too can be an issue. But I am assuming that that kind of sampling would most likely be possible to do under our urban water small grants.
All right, what Stacy's referring to, is the Urban Water Small Grants and RFP is coming out later this year, so keep an eye out for that. Look to your left, Stacy, a lot of questions about what is a SAP, how do you know if you need both a QAP and a SAP? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Basically, you do need a QAP and a SAP, but they can be, typically what we see with volunteer monitoring groups, it's a combined document. And the SAP is more the specifics of how you're going to go out and sample and where you're going to sample and what you're going to sample for. The QAP is more sort of overarching quality assurance procedures and things dealing with your laboratory or how you would do laboratory analysis. If you're not using a laboratory, then a lot of that becomes very simplified and streamlined, and you wouldn't have to do as much. But it's sort of looking at things that, you typically have somebody who is looking at the data that tries to look to see if there's anything that's an anomaly that may not be quite right. But typically for your sorts of groups, this would be one combined document. And a lot of people may just call it a QAP, and some people might call it a SAP, but it's usually a combined QAP and SAP in one document.
Another question from Alberto about, are there requirements different for air quality versus water quality monitoring? And I'm assuming he's talking about the QAP sort of quality control pieces.
QAPs and SAPs are typically, they're required for any kind of monitoring that you do, whether it's air quality, water quality, or sampling for soils. And they're very similar. Obviously, you're dealing with a different sort of media, and you're dealing with slightly different analyses, but the requirement to do it and the similarities between it's very similar. And I also see that Sun answered the question that apparently I was correct, and that ocean water monitoring for stormwater runoff would be allowable under the Urban Water Small Grants. And then I think somebody asked a question about are QAPs and SAPs helpful? Typically they are. Not everybody likes to do them. They're kind of, they can be a little mind-numbing to write and to review. But they can be really helpful, and I can give you an example. When I was on loan to the City and County of Denver, I found out that their water quality monitoring program didn't have a QAP or a SAP. They have incredibly experienced staff. They know what they're doing. They're doing a good job. However, it makes it difficult if they're using that data for something later that you have to be able to demonstrate to people that you collected good quality data. It's difficult if you don't have that. Also, if you lose your staff, it can become really difficult. And so they ended up putting together the QAPs and SAPs and basically memorializing what they were already doing anyway, and they were doing a good job, but now they can sort of prove to people they did a good job. EPA requires it for any money that we give out, but I think I recommend it anyway, and they don't have to be terribly complicated. I think Rachel can talk a little bit more about her perspective of having to do one of these documents. She's going to talk about that a little bit later. I can tell you that my first job right out of school, I actually worked for the Department of Energy at Rocky Flats. The very first thing that I ended up doing was actually writing a QAP and a SAP for some holding ponds that we were going to go out and sample, and I didn't know how to do it, and I went and got EPA's guidance document and sat down and did it, and was able to knock it out pretty easily. I think that anybody that has a science background will probably understand what folks are looking at and why it's important. It's basically sort of documenting the scientific method for how you're collecting this data and why you're collecting it.
Mm-hmm. All right. I see that we've tapped into an information need on the QAP and the SAP front. There's a few questions still on the left. I'm going to go ahead and move us to Jason's presentation, but see if we have time at the end to come back to that, and especially in terms of EPA's role assisting with the development or with the review, and what folks might be able to expect on that front as they're developing these documents. They are detailed, they are mind-numbing, as Stacy says, and really a number of you have experience with those out there. So let's come back to some of these questions, and I would say, Jason and Rachel, if you can address any of them in your presentation, please do. So with that, let me turn it to Jason Ulseth, Chattahoochee Riverkeeper and manager for a very successful volunteer water quality monitoring program. Jason is based out of Atlanta, Georgia. He is the recently been knighted as the Riverkeeper, but he was technical programs director since 2007 with that very successful organization. Also has worked with state government, with the Georgia Environmental Protection Division and Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission. And so he brings a lot of experience, especially in stormwater management with erosion and sediment control, and that's a lot of the issues, water quality issues that Atlanta is dealing with. He also sits on the board of Georgia DNR's Adopt a Stream Advisory Board. So his experience is not only with his own program, but with all those programs across the state. So with that, Jason, let me turn it, so there's a question. Yes, these PowerPoints will be available as PDFs, as will be the recording. So I'll be sure to send that out to everybody who registered for this webinar. So with that, let me turn it over to Jason. If you want to go ahead and start, Jason.
All right. Thanks, Deanna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Okay, and I just lost connectivity. Okay, I'm coming back. So, yeah, I want to talk a few minutes about our Neighborhood Water Watch program, which is very similar to a lot of other volunteer water quality programs across the nation, but I think we're a little unique in a few areas, and I'll share a few of our success stories and how we got to where we're at. But basically, you know, our goals are very similar to most other folks' monitoring programs, where we're providing citizen groups with tools and training to protect their own local waterways and increase public awareness about the water issues, and collecting the valuable data that's just not being collected, unfortunately, by the government agencies and a lot of our tributaries and streams that are flowing through our communities. And then using that data to then go and identify where the polluted areas are, what are the hot spots, and going through and tracking in the field and isolating and fixing the various pollution sources. So this particular program started in 2010 when we had a concerned neighborhood that came to us. They said they had a creek that was flowing through their neighborhood that had intermittent odors, sometimes they had color issues, and every now and then they would have fish kill going into the creek. And we were trying to look back at various governmental files and historical records and current monitoring programs, and there wasn't anything being done to test the creek, and we weren't able to get any traction going that route. So we decided to partner with this one neighborhood group where we went and bought some bacterial testing equipment, set up a lab in our office. They agreed to provide a volunteer that would come out every week, collect the sample, bring it to us, and then we do the analysis so that we could get long-term quality data to determine, you know, what exactly is going on in the creek, how high are the bacteria levels going, and how often are they getting high. So we worked with this one group for a while, and it was working out really well. And then word of mouth started getting around. We started talking with other groups and schools and universities, and we found a huge community of interested people that wanted to get engaged in learning about their local waterways, learning how to protect them, and they just had no avenue to really go and get engaged. So we started partnering with all these groups, and through this Neighborhood Water Watch program, we're getting the long-term quality data that we needed to get them engaged, but also to solve these pollution issues that we were finding. So we'll talk about exactly what we found, but we'll back it up a little bit and show you the main structure of what we're doing. So these are local volunteers that live near a stream in a park or in a neighborhood, or this is someplace where they go jogging with their dog. These are people that are connected to this waterway. I think that's one of the vital parts of this program. It's each of these volunteers has some type of connection to the waterway that they're monitoring, and that's what really keeps them engaged and keeps them going instead of dropping out of the program. And they go every week. We don't have any specified end date for any of our streams. We're monitoring indefinitely because as long as we keep going, we can still find water quality issues, so we keep monitoring. We do it once a week, so we're monitoring out of 3 laboratories right now. and each laboratory has their own separate day for accepting samples, but here in our Atlanta office, every Thursday, volunteers go out, collect their samples, and bring it to us, and we do the analysis. So it's rain or shine, summer or winter, spring or fall, regardless of what's going on, we're going out on those Thursdays and collecting those samples and bringing them in to be analyzed. That way we're not targeting only wet weather events, we're not targeting only dry weather events, and we're getting a good representative look at that waterway over a long period of time. So what these volunteers are doing is we're monitoring at bridges. So most of our samples are on bridges with sidewalks that go over a tributary, and they lower a PVC pipe, which you'll see a picture of that here in a second, that has a Whirlpack bag put inside of it, so they can lower that device, collect their sample, bring it back up. So when we have a heavy rain, we don't have volunteers that are going to the side of the creek and have any safety issues. They're always on the bridges, so whether it's low water or high water, they can go to the middle of the creek, collect that sample, bring it in, and then they bring it to us within 6 hours, and then we do the analysis. So basically all they do is collect the sample, put it in a cooler on ice, drive it straight to us. They fill out a chain of custody form, drop it in the fridge at the lab, and then they're done. And they just commit to doing that every week. And then we do the analysis with EPA-approved Idexx Colilert system, primarily for E. coli, but we also analyze for several other parameters. So there is the PVC bridge sampler. We have, I'll mention this now, we have a how-to guide on developing one of these programs that we've released in 2014, and all of this stuff is within that guide. I'll show you how to find it, and also directions on how to build one of these PVC bridge samplers is in there as well. But these things are fantastic because you use that Whirlpack bag that is sterile, meant for collecting E. coli samples, and nothing but sample water ever comes in contact with the inside of that bag. It keeps everything completely sterile and a good sampling technique. So there's the Colilert system. Here I wanted to touch real quickly on the QAP. We've talked about that in depth already, but I think it is vitally important to have a quality assurance project plan. And because our projects are EPA funded through the Small Grants Program, we were required to go and write a quality assurance project plan. But even before that, we had some type of a version of it. And once we had that plan in place, we were able to upgrade it and write a new plan for the Urban Water Small Grant Program. And I will say, when you are starting a new quality assurance project plan, it can be extremely intimidating trying to go through and write that whole plan. EPA's guidance document for that is over 140 pages. It's very in-depth, very detailed, and the one thing that I've learned with this is don't reinvent the wheel. Try to find another program that has a similar monitoring protocol that you have, get their QAP, and write off of that as most that you can. That was one of the best things that we did, was found another partner's QAP and use that to help develop ours. And a copy of our QAP is within our guidance document that I'll show you how to get. So I don't have a lot of time to talk about E. coli or and optical brighteners, but we do use optical brighteners in trying to source track some of our human sources of E. coli. And basically the concept there is that optical brighteners are present in clothes washing detergents, and if you have a high E. coli sample combined with a high optical brightener sample, then you can determine that that's a human source of E. coli, and you can also use optical brighteners for source tracking in the field. So all of our data gets instantly uploaded on a database that we had developed through a Georgia Tech grad student. She did a great job. It was her thesis project. So working with local colleges is a great way to get your own local databases developed. We've also uploaded to the state and EPA's STORET database. And then we use these readings to determine where the hotspots are throughout the Atlanta area, and then we do bracket sampling upstream to try to isolate the particular source. So here's our numbers starting in 2010. Our first samples, our first year, we had 288 samples, and from there it's basically snowballed to where we've almost doubled each year as we've gone through. In 2014 we had nearly 3,000 samples, and I haven't crunched the numbers in the last week, but I believe we're trending right now to actually double that number of 2014 and 2015 and be near 6,000 samples. So each year, word of mouth and all of the engagement has been incredible. And when Deanna first put out this description of this webinar, we had 80 sites. And since she put out the description and we're doing this today, we've added another 20 sites. So it started off a little slow, but it's been quite incredible how fast we've been going. And our how-to guide is available on our website at chattahoochee.org. And if you can't find it, you can email me directly and I'll send it right to you. So I'm going to try to wrap this up in the next 4 minutes. But one thing that I did want to stress is that it's this long-term quality data. And here's EPA's recommended values for E. coli for recreation. And I'll say in downtown Atlanta, every single one of our sites will meet these numbers for EPA's recommended values for recreation at one point or another, and every single one of them will be above it at one point or another as well. It's a matter of how often are they exceeding that criteria and how high are they getting. So we couldn't put all of the sites onto one graph, but looking at a couple of our sites, this is showing, see if I can do this pointer. No. But the bars with the highest levels are the ones that exceed the criteria the most amount of time, and then the ones that are closest to that red bar are the ones that are the cleanest. And so we graph these and we try to determine which ones have the highest bars, which ones are exceeding these criteria the most often, and then using that to go out in the field and bracket source tracking and doing additional sampling upstream to try to find what's going on. So this is a quick case study of a downtown Atlanta stream. There's our trusty volunteer who went out every week, collected samples, and as she was going out collecting the samples, again, some of them were within the EPA recommended values and some of them were above. And we were looking, we saw that a good amount of them were above the EPA recommended values. And now my thing's not working.
What's not working? That slides are proceeding fine, Jason.
Okay, what are you seeing?
A big outfall, a culvert.
Okay, yeah, my screen went completely blank.
Well, just tell me how to advance.
But basically, what we were able to do, and we've done this with multiple sites, is go upstream of a sample that has continuously high levels or periodically high levels of bacteria, and then you just take each bridge that you have upstream, collect samples at the same time, and that helps you bracket where the source contamination is coming from. And in this case, we were able to take it directly to this one particular pipe. We started collecting samples out of that, and then went to the city of Atlanta and said, look, we've got all of this high bacteria in this park that thousands of people go to every day, and the source that we found is coming out of this pipe. And that's really where the QAP came in and was essential in this program, because Atlanta came back to us and said, well, how do we know what you're collecting is good data? Because what you're asking us to do is go CCTV or closed caption TV system, use smoke and dye testing, and we're going to have to go and spend tens of thousands of dollars to go up this pipe. Based off of what? And then we were able to go back and say, hey, we've got an approved quality assurance project plan, and all of this data is valid, And once we were able to establish that, we've had a fantastic relationship with the City of Atlanta, so that when we go and we report high levels of bacteria, they don't come back and question, oh, maybe it was just some volunteer that went with a Gatorade bottle and didn't know what they were doing. No, they know, because we have this plan in place, that the data that we've collected is of good value and something that they can go and expend their resources on. And without that, I don't think we would be in the same place that we are today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up because I can't see anything on the screen, and that was pretty much what I had to say anyways. But right now, since we've got this program going, we're finding a sewer spill about once every 2 weeks. So these are spills not only within the City of Atlanta, but other adjacent municipalities that would be flowing continuously and flowing today if it wasn't for these volunteers partnering with the nonprofit, getting the data that was needed and going out and finding the pollution sources. So.
All right, thank you, Jason. There's quite a few questions that have lined up, so let me just kind of read them off to you. We've got about probably 10 minutes for questions. Have you considered source typing for human E. coli?
We have done a little bit of that with, I forget the name of the company, it's Microbial Sourcing, something like that. And it wasn't as cut and dry as I was hoping for. They didn't come back with this data that said it was 70% human and 10% dog and 10% bird. It was much more general, and I'm not sure that the technology is quite where that needs to be with your return on investment, because it's very, very expensive. So I don't foresee us doing much more DNA testing in the near future anyways.
Are you analyzing sediment loads? Is the question.
We analyze with turbidity, which helps us with looking at the bacteria levels and comparing them to rainfall, and trying to determine if the bacteria are being rainfall driven or not. So we're not doing total suspended solids, but we're doing turbidity as a surrogate.
How are you funding this program?
So this program has gotten to annual operating expense of about $120,000 a year. And one of the main supporters is the EPA Urban Water Small Grant. But we also have a ton of corporate sponsors and local foundations. In our 21 years of operating, this has been one of the most fundable projects that we have ever had. When we go to large corporations and we talk to them, that we're actually going out, partnering with volunteers, engaging the community, and finding these pollution sources. And I can take the iPad out in a meeting and hit play on this major sewage spill that we found last week with this volunteer. It just blows them away. And it's just been one of the most fundable programs. And I only foresee it growing in the future.
There's a couple of questions related to cost. Mara Diaz asks, how expensive are the fluorometers? Approximately, how much does it cost to test for optical brighteners, and do you see a potential there for volunteer-run programs? And then Ann Keefe is asking, how much does it cost to run just one sample from WorldPax?
So the handheld fluorometer, there's a number of them on the market, but I believe we paid around $3,000 for ours. And then your sample costs are minimal after that. You just have to buy these little cuvettes, sample cells, that you can actually wash and reuse. So your upfront cost is your most expensive cost with the optical brighteners. So they're not something that's cheap enough that you can give to a volunteer and have them, hold on to do sampling with. That's why we have them collect the sample, bring it to us, and then we do the analysis. And as far as the WorldPax go, those things are dirt cheap. A box of 500 is about $100. So those are completely disposable, and one sample for all of the supplies that we use for the Idexx, for the turbidity, for the fluorometry, for the bags, costs about $10 per sample. And if you were to take that to a private lab, you're probably looking at least $75. And that's another great way to sell this to funders, is say, if we're testing this at a private laboratory, it's going to cost us $75 a sample. but we're doing it internally with an approved QAP, and we're doing it at a much more effective cost at $10. So we're able to test, over 7 samples versus just 1.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about the liability concerns? Do you have insurance for your volunteer samples? If you use a waiver, is that a sample that you could share with folks? How do you handle the liability question?
Yeah, we actually do not have liability waivers for our volunteers. We do for some like trash cleanups and things, but we actually haven't had any. And that may be something we need to relook at. But for the safety, we really are very selective in the sites that we are sending our volunteers to. So we always make sure that they have safe parking, safe access. They walk out onto a bridge that has a safe sidewalk. So they're only going and parking next to their site, walking to a sidewalk, collecting the sample, and bringing it to us. We've actually had to turn folks down when they wanted a sample from a busy road that just did not look safe. So that's where we address most of our safety issues.
A question, doesn't the City of Atlanta have a water quality division of its stormwater utility that is required to do illicit discharge detection and elimination? Don't they have the responsibility for doing this work?
Yeah, like any other MS4 municipality, they do have requirements for water quality monitoring and illicit discharge detection systems, but they're not going out and doing this long-term water quality monitoring at each of these neighborhood streams. That routine long-term data, especially in some of these ones that aren't like the biggest tributaries, is just not being done. They're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. But what we're seeing is, particularly with fats, oils, and greases mixed with these supposedly flushable baby wipes, we need to go out to all of these sites and do sampling every week because we're just seeing all of these sewage spills that are coming from these clogs. And the city does do a lot of stream walks. They try to walk about 20% of the streams every year. But I think we actually offer a really good complement to what they're doing, and we strategize with them about what we do.
All right, we might have a few more questions coming in, but let's turn it, thank you so much, Jason. Clearly you've got a lot of great information. I appreciate it. I know I'm collecting a number of questions for sample documents, so I'll check to see. I know you said at chattahoochee.org is where they can find that handbook that you just produced. We'll take a look and see if that's everything that folks are asking for. Otherwise, we'll look for samples and models to share.
Yeah, and we just got a new website, so bear with us. If you can't find it, email me directly. So thank you.
All right. While I pull up the next presentation, I do want to say, back to the question of QAPs, River Network has just hired a new science manager who is not yet on board with our team, but one of the things that we've asked them to help provide support to organizations is the area of developing QAPs. So keep an eye out for that. If you're on that boat where you're trying to put something together and are needing some technical assistance that you're not getting from EPA, let me know, and I'll get you in touch as soon as that person is fully functional on our team. So, all right, let me turn it over now to Rachel, who is program manager with Groundwork Denver. It's an organization that's very closely connected with very grassroots efforts in Denver, yet they're a highly effective, high-capacity organization. She works both on air and water quality projects in the Denver metro area and is managing the project that she's going to talk about, which is using older youth to do some of the monitoring on Lower Bear Creek, which is funded by the Urban Water Small Grants Program. So with that, Rachel, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Deanna. Hi, everybody. I am very pleased to be here. I think it's a great learning opportunity for all of us who are up and coming in monitoring programs, and like Jason, who have a little bit more experience bringing all of those partnerships to bear. Just a little bit more information about Groundwork Denver, and I noticed there are a lot of other Groundwork affiliates on the line as well. We really work with those communities that have social or economic disadvantages and really bring about the physical improvement of the environment so that all people can live well and have access to the natural environment in urban areas. And as I go through this program, you will definitely see that we've brought a lot of partners to bear, and the success of our work is really guided by the partnerships that we maintain and that we strengthen. This map is a little bit fuzzy, but I wanted to give you an idea about where our current monitoring program is. The top two maps in the left-hand corner, you can see the state of Colorado. Oops. Somebody is moving my my slides. And then we also have 3 different counties that lie within the lower Bear Creek watershed. So we have Jefferson County to the left of the map, which basically includes the city of Lakewood. We also have Denver and Denver County, which is represented by the pink area inside this 12-digit hydrologic unit code, which is the black line. And then the basically 2.5 square mile city of Sheridan, where the lower Bear Creek confluences with the South Platte River. So you will notice that outside of the hydrologic unit code, we have basically the dam. It's the Bear Creek Reservoir, which was implemented in the late 60s, early 70s because of flooding. So this has definitely had an impact on water quality for the downstream neighbors there. A brief history about how Groundwork Denver became involved in this portion of the creek. It's roughly 8.2 miles from the outfall of Bear Creek Reservoir to the confluence with the South Platte. And our green team, which is basically our team of youth, so these are high school and college-aged youth who come together and are trained to not only work in urban environments on environmental quality, but also to gain experience for ongoing employment opportunities as they're moving through college and into the working world. So initially, they had coordinated with the city of Sheridan as well as the city of Denver to help with sediment erosion. And what they would do is remove invasive species and then also plant some of the native species that would help stabilize the banks and reduce all of that sediment that would just launch off into the creek during wet weather events. In 2010, then, Lower Bear Creek was listed on Colorado's Impaired Waters, or 303D list, due to elevated levels of E. coli. And because one of the designated uses for Lower Bear Creek is recreation, where people will have primary contact, so that will be swimming, that will be wading, this is an important public health concern. And that's how Groundwork Denver initially applied for and then received 319 funding, and Stacey mentioned this earlier as being one of the funding mechanisms of the EPA that is then distributed to each state health department. And Groundwork Denver received a non-point source grant, 319 grant, in 2012 to create a non-point source watershed plan. And this had specifically to do with non-point source pollution, which is different from point source pollution, that being the effluent coming from certain sites that are regulated, such as sanitary sewer treatment facilities. And in the West, we definitely do have differences in our sanitary sewers and our storm sewers. So those are 2 separate systems. And as Jason mentioned, the permitted cities, the municipal separate storm sewer systems, which is MS4, they have regulations about how clean their water coming from storm sewers is, and we were looking at runoff from all the other points within that watershed boundary. So it took us basically 2 years to put together a non-point source watershed plan that was then submitted back to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And we are waiting with bated breath to get some feedback on that plan. We included the EPA 9 elements, and for any of you who have worked on a non-point source watershed plan, you understand the level of specificity in each of those. And I'm happy to talk with anybody who has not worked on one of those previously but is interested in doing so. And then in November of last year, Groundwork Denver received an EPA Urban Water Small Grant to implement various aspects of our watershed plan. And this is the grant where we were required to complete a quality assurance project plan as well as a sampling and analysis plan. And as Jason, I think, really hit it on the head, don't reinvent the wheel. There are definitely examples out there, and it's really just a matter of putting all of those necessary pieces in place, and really it helps you understand much more fully how your program is associated with the quality of your data, how the data will be used in the future, and also being protective of your field samplers who are out there. The CLAP, again, is very essential, I think, in terms of mitigating the fear factor. That is something that we definitely encountered when we were first developing partnerships with the public works departments of each of the cities in the watershed. There's protection within that realm for their storm sewer outfalls. They are required to maintain healthy water there, but there's also that understanding that it could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even millions of dollars in order to repair infrastructure. So it really is about understanding what their perspective is, what your perspective is, and how you can really benefit each other instead of being adversarial. Initially, our 319 grant did not include money for a monitoring project. So we have been running a monitoring project for 2 years, 2012 to 2014, without any funding. And really that came about because we established partnerships with people from our EPA region, which is EPA Region 8. So that was Stacey Erickson, that was Carl Herman, that was Marcy Tidd, that was Tom Slave. And these are people who had a very vested interest in water, number one, but also in bringing to bear the resources of the communities that we worked in and really facilitating that understanding that we all can work together in a very productive way. The Metro State University Biology Department, which is headed by Dr. Rebecca Farrell, also became a very critical piece of our monitoring plan because she had students, microbiology students, who were invested in a real-world learning experience. We basically partnered with them strictly as using them as field samplers, but then once we got our Urban Water Small Grant, also utilized their lab, so an entirely different lab outside of EPA for doing our analysis. And we are using the exact same analysis standard methodology that Jason is. It's the Idexx Colilert. Denver Environmental Health then has always also been very instrumental. They provide us not only with equipment when we didn't have equipment of our own, but also we coordinate all of our sampling with them to make sure that our results and our data are being used as a complement to theirs and really facilitating greater understanding about water quality in general. The city of Sheridan, which is that teeny tiny 2-mile square city, is really the one city that has permitted us to sample their outfalls, which is brilliant. And we can talk a little bit more about that at some point too. Sheridan High School then is the group that we are going to be engaging for summer employment this year. River Watch then is our local program that monitors for metals, nutrients, and macrovertebrates and definitely brings a more comprehensive understanding to our water quality efforts. This map then shows all of our monitoring sites. We have 20 different monitoring sites on this 8.2-mile stretch. We have one site below the confluence with the South Platte and one site above. And then basically the way we selected all of our sites in between was to identify either bracketing tributaries in Lakewood, which is near Bear Creek Reservoir, and then supplementing sites for Denver in the middle section. And then in Sheridan, there are a number of outfalls that drain directly into the creek, so we bracketed them that way. The way that we have organized our sampling and analysis is basically a summer session and then a year-round session. And initially we started with just EPA as conducting the analysis, and we sampled in summer because high use for recreational activities is really only present during, May through August. So we would have MSU students sample and then take all of our samples to the EPA Region 8 lab. This summer, we'll have an opportunity to bring on our Sheridan High School students who will be employed through the project to do the sampling, and then we will have 2 different labs to analyze results. This gives us an opportunity to really identify if there are any problems in our analysis methods, because we'll have comparative results. So both Metro and EPA will sample during or analyze during the summer. And then year-round, we have some very dedicated students from MSU Denver who not only sample but also analyze. So in the center circle, you can see that what we're doing for each sampling event is collecting E. coli samples. We're collecting field parameters, so that's temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, turbidity. We're using the Colilert, which is the EPA approved standard method, and then we are also sharing our data with all of our partners. We do have a link on our website as well where you can access by site what the most current E. coli results are per location. Are there any questions so far?
Yeah, there's Natalie Ellington. How difficult was it to engage high schoolers in the monitoring effort? What's working for you there?
Right, so this is our first venture in actually employing high school students, and this slide indicates what our general overview of this program is. We have money through our small Urban Water Small Grant to employ 8 different high school students, and I think these are all going to be coming from Sheridan High School. Sheridan High School is definitely one of the more underserved communities as well as schools in the watershed. We have 120 hours then where we will be paying them to learn about watershed education. So an overview of the ecosystems and how human impacts influence water quality in urban areas. We're also going to teach them how to conduct water quality sampling. So we'll have them out in waders. We'll be talking about aseptic technique. We will take some of them to the lab at Metro State so that they can really see the process completed and what we do with our data. They're also going to be doing some outreach in the neighboring communities. That's part of what our non-point source watershed plan identified, was working with communities that are closest to the creek, because people who have a visual or people who have that engagement understand more about the changes in those creek systems. We also then have partnered with Parks and Rec departments throughout those 2 different municipalities to engage in some different stewardship activities. The Metro State biology students will become the mentors for these students for the course of the summer. And Donnie Roush, who I believe is on the line, is part of Earth Force and has a great program called KickNet, Keep It Clean Natural Environmental Trios. And this is a program that focuses on schools with a rec center nearby and a body of water. So we had a great conversation with Sheridan High School recently, whereby we will have a group of kids who are employed for the summer with Groundwork Denver, and then they will have an opportunity to learn with some very hands-on and very detail-oriented experiences through KickNet starting in the fall. And really, what we attempt to do in Groundwork Denver, and I believe this happens in a number of other groundworks nationwide as well, is to welcome young people into a number of different projects throughout several programs, help them develop skills, provide them training, provide them opportunities. We have probably 4 different long-term employees now who were part of our green team. So they have this great ability to stair-step. If we can actually reach them through a project like KickNet when they're younger, help employ them in water quality monitoring when they're in high school, really help bring them into a more full understanding about watershed health and also how policy for water quality is driven, provide them opportunities to not only conduct analysis, but also other research as they're, potentially moving through into college. Metro State is one of those colleges that really welcomes people from around the globe, but to be very active in their local communities. We're also hoping then that this sort of ring, this ladder, will help facilitate those students into internships. And while Groundwork Denver typically does not pay for internships, we've had a couple of our Metro State students who have been hired on by Denver Environmental Health, who also have opportunities to work with the EPA. And then this basically bridges that gap to really make sure that we have leaders in water quality. And of course, in a headwater state like Colorado, it's definitely a mixed discussion of quality and quantity that comes to bear as well. So we're trying to make sure that there is this seamless continuity, that we're touching students and community members and bringing in different partners that really help us grow those minds and that understanding that will then lead us into the future. How did we arrive here? I have very fond memories of being up at one of the conferences that Stacy mentioned, which was Sustaining Colorado Watersheds, and it's in Avon, Colorado. And basically there are nights where local breweries will come and support us with some beer, but it's also a great networking opportunity. So really just finding people of like mind and being able to share your stories, your dreams, your intent. Ringing the doorbell with your elbow is also really important. I think it's important to know how you can provide other partners what they may need. So that's how we all succeed, is knowing how we can support one another and really making those changes happen. These are some photographs of some of the youth that we have had either playing in the creek or sampling, or you'll see on the bottom left-hand corner that we're definitely out there sampling in all kinds of weather. We definitely want to know about seasonal variations as well as diurnal variations. And there's a lot of work, and I think typically for E. coli, there's an understanding that you can't identify trends unless you have a great deal of information. I've heard anywhere from 5 to 20 years, and that's part of our process right now, is just to engage all of our partners for the long term, to really help everyone understand that we can be involved for the long term, bring to bear volunteers, and really help encourage student participation as well. And this is my dream vehicle. We are typically carrying all of our gear in gasoline-powered vehicles, but the MSU students and I have thought that this would be a perfect, have a little rickshaw or a tuk-tuk, so that we can load up all our equipment, have our little banners, and basically stop and chat with people along the way as we're sampling. Any other questions that I can answer?
Yeah, let me point you to Alberto's question. How much, if at all, are you coordinating with the high school teachers to make sure that there's alignment between this project and curriculum standards for high schoolers?
Right. So because this is our very first employment project for water quality sampling, we are lucky to partner with EarthForce, who has done all of that footwork and has really aligned all of the Colorado state standards for learning with the curriculum for the KickNet program. And this becomes more of a sort of a an in-field learning experience and will certainly improve upon what it is they're learning on, sort of a semester-long basis as well. So this is, I think the employment piece is definitely parallel with all of those, but not to the degree that the KeekNet program is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. And I'm wondering, Danny, if you could type in maybe your website onto the chat box to the extent that you have some of those materials available. It would be great to let folks know what are the resources that EarthForce might provide. Coming right up. All right. Another example sounds like Cheryl Anderson is also has engaged with university, in this case Manitowoc, with University of Wisconsin, Manitowoc Biology Department, and they're finding ways to use those students to sample 6 different creeks. So great job there. Let me keep typing in your questions. I want to pull up some of the earlier questions that came up for our other presenters. Stacy, is there anything you can share briefly here about the grant process, the EPA grant process? And I'm assuming that's going to be a lot in about the small grants, urban water small grants, I guess.
Yeah, we have a number of different grants, the Urban Water Small Grants, like I said, environmental education, environmental justice grants. The Urban Water Small Grants, all the 10 regions are working with headquarters and some other folks to finalize the request for proposal. We're actually making some changes to it. Basically, it comes out every other year, and a lot of, it depends on how much money we get in our budget, on how many grants we end up funding. But I think we're hoping that it's going to be coming out sometime this fall. Typically, we try to allow around 60 days for people to respond to it. I think sometimes it can be a little bit less, but we usually try to allow plenty of time for folks to put their RFPs together. We usually do webinars that folks can get more information about that. If you go to the urbanwaters.gov website, there's some information from past people that have been funded. There's a lot of, we've changed it a little bit every year. Part of that is trying to figure out how to work the process better and how to align our very limited resources. I think we've been very fortunate, in Denver, that we had a lot of our former and current grantees actually working together, which I think Rachel alluded to with the partnership with EarthForce, but also some of our other grantees that I think has been really helpful.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. Rachel, can you talk a little bit about how you're using the data?
Yes. For any stream that is listed on the state 303D list, there's basically a window of opportunity in which watershed plans or data collection can help inform the creation of a total maximum daily load. So because Sheridan and Lakewood have priorities in other waterways, we have basically set ourselves up as the group that collects data in order to submit it to both the Water Quality Control Division at the State Health Department, as well as sharing it with EPA, so that when that total maximum daily load for E. coli is written, we will have a decent amount of data, and there will be less pushback from those communities that will then have that TMDL implemented on their segment of the creek. We are also sharing it then with any of our partners, whether those are the wastewater treatment facilities that are outside of our watershed, or typically anybody who's interested. And we do have analysis that is conducted on various parameters, looking at what trends might be happening with, let's say, turbidity and E. coli. And we are also then, one of Jason's slides showed the geometric mean. That's how we are presenting all of our data, is the geometric mean for a 60-day rolling cycle during high use periods.
Great. All right. I just got an urgent message from one of our speakers, Jason, who got lost phone connectivity, but let me answer some of the questions that were posed to him. What are the designated uses that are being monitored through that Neighborhood Watch program in Atlanta, and what does the city do to clean up once they identify these problems? He said mostly it's fishing, and most of the sources of bacteria are clogged sewer lines. So he says once the source is known, the city can go in and unclog it relatively quickly. Another question that was posed is, are you looking for spikes in sample results compared to past average or high number of exceedances? And your bracket sampling is showing clear differences to identify those hotspots. His response is some are spikes and others are number of exceedances. We just try to learn each waterway and how the bacterial levels fluctuate each week. And yes, we can see night and day differences in using bracket sampling in some cases, particularly in smaller tributaries. Thank you, Donnie. Donnie just uploaded, if you see there on the left-hand side, a couple of links to learn more about Earth Force's materials and tools. And Earth Force is a national organization as far as I understand it, so they certainly are working in many other areas outside of Denver. He does make a reference to the Urban Waters Learning Network Basecamp site. So for those of you who are not in the Learning Network but are interested in learning more about it, I'm going to post here a link, urbanwaterslearningnetwork.org, where we have a number of case studies and some funding opportunities. For example, the next time an RFP goes out for the Urban Water Small Grants Program, we will certainly include it there on that website. Basecamp is an online platform that we use to communicate among the Learning Network members. And so a lot of the Learning Network members have uploaded their, draft, whether it's, liability waivers or educational materials, analysis of how, education standards align with certain outreach programs, et cetera. So if you are interested in joining the Learning Network or seeing some of that stuff that's been uploaded on Basecamp, you just let me know, dtoledo@rivernetwork.org, and I can get you into the system. I'm not seeing any more questions. Looks like we've handled most of the questions, so unless anybody has something else to chime in, I do want just to wrap it up, thank our three presenters. Thank you so much, Jason, and Rachel. You're seeing their email addresses here, so if you, they're all willing to answer questions and provide you with some of the samples if there's something you want to ask them about, so please be in touch with them. And I will say that this is our first foray in the Learning Network to provide a webinar on water quality monitoring programs. There's obviously a lot of places we could go much more in depth into this issue, such as offering possibly a webinar on quack development, et cetera. So we do have a evaluation form. You see the link there on the very bottom of the note page, and as soon as I close this webinar room, you'll be directed to it in your browser. But please use that form to provide us feedback, but also if there are particular webinar topics that you are interested in, whether related to today's topic or unrelated, let us know. We'd love to put together opportunities for you to hear from your peers and from experts around the country, and so I'd love to hear your ideas for what's needed. So with that, is there anything, Stacy or Rachel, that you'd like to add?
No, thanks everyone for joining.
I thank you very much, everyone. I would mention, I think somebody asked a question about, working with some of the different schools. I know that Donnie and Earth Force has done a lot of work as far as the STEM curriculum and integrating different pieces of what they do with the teachers. We also have another group in Denver, the Greenway Foundation, that has done quite a bit of that too. And previous groups that I worked with up in Fargo, they did a lot of work with integrating with third and fourth grade curriculum development. So I think that that's fairly common in a lot of places.
All right. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and close the room. Just